This episode of Free Mind Podcast is brought to you by Bioprotein Technology, the makers of BioPro Plus. BioPro Plus is a non-synthetic growth hormone alternative. Comes in a little vial. You take it under your tongue each morning. No needles or any messy stuff like that. Packed full of growth factors, all kinds of beneficial stuff. I've been taking it for months and my results have been awesome. Recovered from knee surgery, helped my libido, my energy levels, everything. I feel great. Can't recommend it enough. Bioproteintech.com. Use the code FREEMIND, FREEMIND, and get $30 off. So I was really interested in talking to you because basically I like talking to all kinds of people with interesting stories, but also high achievers, high performers, people who sort of exemplify getting after it in life, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, etc. And so I talk to a whole bunch of people from all sorts of different backgrounds. The show is called Free Mind for a reason. I do talk a lot of politics just by nature of the fact that of who comes on the show, but that's not all that I try to talk about. So I really wanted to bring you on because you have built this big following online. You do online coaching and you're an Olympic weightlifter. And that's an area that I think is fascinating. And so for me personally, I did a lot of powerlifting and bodybuilding. I kind of went back and forth, and I did some Olympic lifting when I had a stint doing CrossFit until I shredded my rotator cuff in a competition.
I've heard that story before.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was a couplet between ring muscle ups and snatches. And in my opinion, and I really want to go into this with you, doing Olympic lifts for time, I feel like is a recipe for disaster in most contexts. But
I agree.
before, and I figured you would,
Yeah.
because just kind of looking at your content, your biomechanics are so spot on, and that's great to see. And I think it's a great example for people. But before we jump into that, tell everybody who the heck you are, what you do, all of that good stuff in your own words.
Definitely. So thanks for having me on, first of
Of
all.
course.
I'm honored to be here. I've been following you for a while and I was truly, truly grateful for the invitation to come on. But who I am, let's see. So my name is Rebecca Rouse. I am now an entrepreneur, but wasn't always that way. So I have an interesting background as far as that's concerned. I'm a competitive weightlifter. I am a military spouse. I am, gosh, what else? Just really passionate about strength, mental and physical, toughness, resiliency. It's kind of been a work in progress for myself, and then something I really am passionate about bringing to my clients and the people that follow me as well. So that's probably me in a nutshell.
Awesome. And do you work primarily with males or females or a combination of both, just kind of whoever in terms of your
Combination,
coaching? Okay.
combination of both. They're both
Yeah.
unique challenges for sure. But over my career, I've worked with more females than males. But right now, I'd say it's about 50-50.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, I was curious about that because I I used to do a lot of nutrition coaching, not as much training, just because I am passionate about training, but I really enjoy helping people dial in their nutrition because a lot of times that's where they're lacking. I mean, you probably know darn well, but I noticed between men and women, and even when I used to own my company, when I would hire leaders within my company, I found women to be way more coachable, like way more like in a good way. And even so, most of the leaders I hired within my company were women as well because they just I don't know, it's almost like there's an ego thing with guys. It's like they don't want to take direction as easily. And I don't know if it's because I'm another guy, but is that anything you've experienced or how's that dynamic work, especially being a female coaching men?
Yeah, that's a great question. I probably would agree with the fact that, taking a male taking advice from another male, especially somebody as, alpha and dominant as you are, that might be challenging. But for I feel like if people are coming to me, like men specifically are coming to me for coaching, they're at a place where they're just like ready to take that advice. Otherwise, why would
Ah,
they pay money to have someone
true.
tell them what to do and then not do it? Although there are plenty of those people out there that self-sabotage, and that's a whole other conversation. But most of the males that I've worked with are at that place where they're coachable and they are ready to, learn from somebody who is willing to help them. So
That's cool. Yeah, the self-sabotage thing is really interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it because it is something that it's, like, pervasive in humans. And I don't know if it's so I'll give you my thoughts on it and then tell me what you think because it feels to me like and it's the same concept really as overcomplicating a simple issue because that kind of gives you an out, but now you have an excuse as to why you weren't successful at a thing because it's this extremely complex thing when really no, it was very simple, not easy, but simple and you just didn't execute. Do you think that self-sabotage is a way for people to mitigate the possibility that they might have to face the fact that they aren't as good when they actually put in the work and they aren't as good as they think they are, or the work is harder than they anticipate it'll be? What do you think self-sabotage is? Because it is everywhere.
yeah, I think it's probably a combination of all the things you said. I think sometimes people fear success, like everyone fears failure, but I think there's also an element where people fear success because they don't
Yeah.
know, like that could take. I find myself falling into this category as I grow as an entrepreneur. Like we all want to get to that next level, but then we kind of don't know what lies beyond that when we open the next door. And so, are we ready for that? Do we have the resources? Do we have the team and the systems in place to really take ourselves to that next level? So I think there's some of that. But yeah, I think some of it's just like people want to make excuses and just it's that way to just prolong the process. Or I have a client, a couple clients I've worked with that it's like they'll take every action except the one that they need to take, so they feel good about checking boxes, but it's not
Yeah.
getting them to where. So they're going somewhere, but it's not doing. They're not doing the thing that they need to really do to get to the goal because it's hard or because they'd rather do something else that's more comfortable. So I think there's a little bit of both of those things depending on who you're talking about.
Yeah, it is so true. And it's like you can convince yourself that you're making progress in some capacity. So it happens a lot with entrepreneurs too, like people who want to be business owners that have kind of fallen into this trap of business ownership is sexy from like the Gary V type personalities and stuff, which I love Gary and I love a lot of his messaging, but he makes it look cool and sexy. And you probably know by now it's anything but in a lot of ways cool and sexy. It is a grind. It is working 100 hours a week so you don't have to work 40 hours a week a lot of times, right?
Yep.
And what happens is they'll do stuff like listen to business podcasts and read business books and consume, consume, consume. And it's a way for them to justify the fact that they are making quote progress, but just like you said, they're not doing the boring, hard stuff that you have to do to take you to the next level. And I think people do that in fitness. Dude, look, I used to do it when I was training for powerlifting. I avoided the GHD like the plague. I hated doing glute ham raises so much because my hamstrings were freaking weak relative to pretty much the rest of my posterior chain, and it was embarrassing. And then when I finally bit the bullet and did it, assisted with bands at first until I could finally start to actually do glute ham raises with my body weight. Um, when I finally did that, I advanced and I got stronger. And it was the exact same thing. Like I kept thinking of things to do to fill my time. I'm still training,
Yep.
but I
Yep.
know in the back of my head I should be doing those damn GHRs and I'm not doing them. And I think people do that in like every area of life. Um,
Absolutely.
you mentioned being like a newer entrepreneur and your business is Semper Stronger, right? That's the
Right.
coaching business. I mean, it looks like it's doing pretty dang good, at least in terms of the following and the volume of interest it generates on social media. When did you start that and where did you come from before that? I think I because I've listened to a few episodes you've done on other shows. You were in more of a commercial gym environment.
Yep,
prior to
exactly.
coming out on your own. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So my first job out of college was a personal training job at Equinox, and it
Nice.
was something I thought I was going to do for a year, maybe two, while I figured out what I, quote, really wanted to do. And I ended
Right.
up falling in love with it. And so I stayed with Equinox for 6.5 years. I went from trainer to manager in training to fitness manager, personal training manager, and then managing several clubs. And so I had really good growth and I enjoyed it. It was a good company to get a start in the personal training world and fitness industry. They provide a ton of education, mandatory education, and then additional like continuing education opportunities. So I got a really good foundation of knowledge as a coach, and then also leadership experience as a manager. So it was a phenomenal way to start as a trainer and manager. And then in COVID, when COVID hit, we shut down, and I was working in San Diego at the time, and so obviously California was kind of the last place to open things back up. We don't need to. Well, we could get there if we want to, but
Don't tempt
so
me, my friend.
I know we could talk for a long time about that. So anyway, so we shut down, and we had no idea how long it was going to be. It was a couple weeks, 14 days at first, and then it was a month, and then it was several months, and I was like, who knows? This could go on for a long time. This is so much. This is so unpredictable, and so I'm just not that person to sit around and wait for opportunities. I'd rather go make my own. So we shut down in March. We were able to continue working from home and getting paid, and then they started to cut back our salary gradually and gradually, and then it was 50%, and then it was complete furlough. So after that, it was a matter of weeks before I was like, no, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to sit around and wait to get my job back and for someone else to tell me what my future is going to look like. I'm going to go make it happen. So in August, I left the company and launched my business in September. I had kind of been planning and working on it the whole time because I was used to working. I was the first one in, last one out type of person as a
Right.
manager. So I'd get there at 6:30 or 7 in the morning and leave at 6 or 7 at night. So and now I'm working from home with all this extra time because it's going from managing a facility and trainer 30 trainers or whatever to like having 2 hours of work a day left me with a lot of time. And so I just started. My husband and I were together, stuck in my little apartment in San Diego, and so we just decided to start working on building a business. And coaching is all I've ever known. In fitness industry coaching and leadership is all I've ever known. So I knew it was going to be something in that realm, but I really didn't know what it was going to be. And at the time, I really didn't see past like I just need to build an online platform where I can train my one-on-one clients, and that was all I knew at the time. So that's where we started, and then from there, it just kind of gradually grew into okay. I have a lot of clients. I have a full book. I'm making good money there. So how can we grow this? And then we started to create the membership platform. And so then we were like, okay, cool. We're online. We can. There's no boundaries. We're not limited to a physical location like a gym. We can have clients and members all over the country or the world for that matter. And we started to get members from Germany and from
Wow.
Australia, New Zealand, and Mexico and Panama. And it was super cool to just build this community of people that are passionate about strength and bring people together from countries all over the world. And so we focused our attention on growing the membership. And then, so that was most of 2021 and just continuing to add programs that I wrote. And so it was like one-on-one coaching, our membership. And then try to release a new signature program. We called it every 6 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks. And then this year, the second half of this year has really been focused on getting ready to build a team of coaches because I know now I understand like scalability. I'm
Mhm.
not scalable. I'm the only one that's doing the coaching. So I brought on another coach to kind of help me get ready to do that and start interviewing and hiring additional coaches. And we are currently in the interview process. We have 3 interviews this week. We just hired our first additional coach um, 2 weeks ago, and we've got a couple more lined up this week. And so 2023 is going to be focused on scaling via additional coaches to use our platform that we've spent 2 years creating, coaching their clients, helping us spread the word, and continue to grow both the one-on-one and the membership. And that's where we're at now.
Wow, that's amazing. So, in terms of your offering, you have the membership, you have the programs that you write periodically, and then you also have, I would assume, the highest level, which is one-on-one
Yeah.
coaching.
Yep.
Um, for people listening who, because I get a lot of listeners who are ambitious young people, and maybe they think they want to go out on their own, do their own thing, maybe even coaching like what you do in the realm of fitness or weightlifting specifically. Like once you decided I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to do my own thing. Where did you start in terms of figuring out what platform to use for your membership? All of these things that might have people like a deer in the headlights, like, holy crap, this is so overwhelming. I don't even know what to do. How do I start? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, that was. there's a lot of trial and error at the beginning. I mean, still
Yeah.
everything's trial and error really, but
That's true.
for the platform specifically, which is a big choice because once you get in, you're kind of stuck with the platform.
Mhm.
So we white label our app. So it's a Semper Stronger app, but it's another company that builds fitness, has a fitness app, and we just put our branding on it. So that worked for us as a brand new business. Like we didn't want to go down the road of developing our own app. Maybe eventually one day we will, but I know that requires like a whole
Yeah.
other thing.
Smart
So
move.
yeah. So we, started with the low hanging fruit. And so there's at least, a dozen out there, probably more now, different fitness apps that you can use for delivering coaching. Some are more one-on-one coaching friendly. Some are a little bit more like to the masses friendly. So I think we probably tried 5 or 6 different ones. We did like most of them offer a 2-week free trial or a month-long free trial. And so we just tried them out and we tried to look at both the coach standpoint from like how easy is it to create and deliver a program on the coaching side, and then also the user experience side. And my husband's very good with the user experience aspect and technology and that sort of user friendliness. So
Awesome.
yeah, so we make a great team. We have very complementary skill sets in that sense. So he was looking more from the user experience side, like will our customers be satisfied with this type of product? Is it user friendly? What kind of questions can we anticipate from them? Because there's always going to be people that get confused or whatever. So which one has the best of both worlds? And so we ended up deciding on the one that we have now, and it's worked out pretty well. It's not perfect, none of them are, but this
Yeah.
was one to suit our needs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that in terms of if you're starting out and you want to have an app interface for your coaching, there are a lot of options in terms of like white label technology where you can just take it, put your branding on it, and run with it like that. So that's really cool that you guys were able to do that. And in terms of getting clients, and again, this is all just sort of because I know people listening are this is the stuff people want to know. They're like, okay, if I'm starting this business, I'm trying to get clients now. I know I have the skills. Was that organic just through social media, or did you start working mainly with the people you had worked with at Equinox, kind of brought them over, or a combination of both? And it online in terms of getting clientele, I know you mentioned international clients and stuff. Was that just organic, or did you actually go out and pay for marketing and go down that road?
We have yet to spend $1 on marketing, which is
That's amazing.
pretty cool. I
Yeah.
think 2023 will be the year we have to. Now that we're going to have a team of coaches, and there's going to be a give and take there, where we're letting them use our platform and providing them all these different things, and we want to be able, and they're going to help us with organic marketing, but we also want to be able to provide them with
Yeah.
uh, good quality clientele as well. But that's going to be our big step for this year. But no, we haven't thus far spent any money on marketing. Everything at the beginning, a few clients came over with me from Equinox, and that some of them are still training with me today, 2.5 years later, which is cool. And but then some were just through social media. I mean, I've been fortunate to be able to grow my following organically over the last couple of years, which I never anticipated, but here we are.
Yeah.
And so it's been huge. Social media is a blessing and a curse. It's a vast world, and there's tons of people out there, but it's you got to filter through the people who just want free advice versus people who are willing to pay for a service and my knowledge and expertise that I've spent years developing. And so I've had to learn my own, through the hard way, learn boundaries. I used to give away a ton of advice for free via DMs, and as my following's grown, the volume of questions that I get has grown exponentially. But I'm learning to put some boundaries there. But anyway, so yeah, it's been mostly or entirely organic through mostly social media and referrals.
That's awesome. So I thought of a couple questions while you were explaining that. So you now, I mean, you have over 100,000 Instagram followers, which most people are like, "Oh my god, that seems so unattainable. That's crazy," right? I used to recruit for First Form. I helped them out with their recruiting for their affiliate program and the brand ambassador athlete stuff. And I interviewed a lot of people interested in the company, and that was always a big sticking point or issue that people had. They thought, "Man, I only have like 1,500 followers. How can I even be effective?" And it's very discouraging when they go online and they see someone who's got 100 and however many you have, 100,000 plus followers. And what I would tell those people is, "Look, dude, you say 1,500 followers like it's not a big deal, but picture 1,500 people in a room who give a shit about what you have to say. That's pretty phenomenal. If you
Yeah,
stepped into that room and you had to speak to them, you'd be nervous as hell, right? That's a lot of people. And when you frame it like that, people start to realize, "Oh, you're right." And I still have an audience who cares about what I'm saying. When you first started out on your own, had you already built a little bit of a following, or how did it look compared to what it is now?
I'm trying to remember. I let's see. I remember I hit 10,000. I think it was November of 2020.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So and I've gotten asked before, like, "Did you pay for followers?" No, I would not. Like, I don't care that much about the number.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Like you said, it's quality is more important than quantity, especially if you're using social media to promote a business. Like, it doesn't matter how many followers you have; it's how many can you convert to paying customers.
Right,
And
and I
so,
think it actually can go against you because to me, it's pretty obvious if I see somebody who's got like 150,000 followers and like 30 likes on a post, I'm
yeah,
like, "Okay,
that's
well,
different.
that discredits you completely," right? You drive people away. Whereas if this is someone with 500 followers, 30 likes on a post, and I like the information they're putting out, I'm like, "Oh, it's just someone starting out who knows
Yeah,
their stuff. Let's give them a chance," right?
exactly, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so you started at wow. So in 2020, you're at 10K and now you're over 100,000. And that's, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, looking at your content, it's really just taking the time to put stuff out that's valuable, that actually provides people. And this is because people ask me all the time, like, what my strategy was for growing my following. I'm like, dude, I don't have a strategy. I really just, if it's something that I think people need to see or hear, or it would be a lot of times the political stuff, it's like I'm making a statement and also being funny. I like doing that as well, but it's like I just wanna provide people value. I don't care about how many likes it'll get, and I'll see people who are in the, I don't know what you would call it, the political commentators type space. There's all these people with big followings that post political stuff. And it's so funny to me, Rebecca, when I see you can tell they'll make a post and if they hide the number of likes on it, it's because a post didn't do very well. And I'm like, dude,
Yep,
I don't care if I get 10 likes on a post. If it's of value and I think people need to see it, that's all I care about. I put it out. I don't care if somebody's like, oh haha, he didn't get a lot of likes. Who gives a shit about that, right?
right. And
My
no one else is looking. Like, we think that everyone else is going to judge us because we got 10 likes, but literally no one cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And I like to mention that whenever I can because especially young people, like dudes in their early 20s, that's the main type of person that reaches out to me, young men. And you know, I have a soft spot in my heart for young men who are kind of up against it these days with the demonization of masculinity and everything else they deal with. But I'm like, dude, stop worrying about how many likes or shares or whatever you get and just take the time to create valuable content. And I guarantee you it will grow. But
Yep,
if you're just in this superficial pursuit of likes, like look, you can perfect example. The content you create is extremely informative. You really, I mean, you exemplify great mechanics in your lifts and you talk about important stuff and your following has grown. And that's also beneficial for your business because you're in the business of coaching. Now, you can take an attractive fitness influencer girl who just posts her booty all day long, and yeah, she'll get a lot of likes, but that's where it stops, right? She doesn't have an engaged following who cares about what she has to say, who might be interested in actually using her business to better themselves, right? So that's where the big difference is, and that's what I tell people all the time. It's like, bro, just focus on creating value.
absolutely. Yeah, the booty pics don't add value to society. I mean,
No,
not in a productive way, at least. So
oh
I know.
my gosh, a very unproductive way. And I
Yeah,
like again with young men, it's like, dude, you're just getting these little dopamine hits constantly all day long, and it's just destroying your brain. Um, and I know you're a fan of Huberman and the stuff he puts out. I've seen you kind of repost some of his stuff on your story. He talks about that a lot.
yes.
Um, what is your uh as a and you might hate the fact that I use this word. I hate this word, but as an
Influencers
influencer,
hate
uh
it.
what is your I mean, what's your general, like, overall thought on this crazy, like, microwave mentality we have of, like, the constant need for stimulation, TikTok, Instagram, etcetera? Everything is trending that way, and I don't know how old you are. I assume we're similar in age. You're
I'm
probably
thir
younger than me.
I'm
Uh,
31.
okay, yeah, I'm 35. So we're kind of that older millennial generation. And for me, I find myself, I'm like the old guy telling these young dudes, like, back when I was your age, I wasn't looking at my phone all the time. Like, how do you think this is affecting people?
Oh gosh, such a loaded question, but a good question and an important discussion because like you, I find myself reflecting on the good old days in the
Yeah.
90s with like AOL and you've got mail at
Mm,
8 a.m. and it was such a simpler time. And it's such a blessing and a curse to have what we have, information at our fingertips and everything's
yeah.
accessible, everything's a click away. And you can get food delivered, you can get your groceries delivered, you can get anything you want in 5 seconds. And so I think we've lost the appreciation for effort and hard work, which I think is a huge detriment to our society. It's like, the trophy for every place and the reward for showing up. Like showing up is nothing. Showing up, Tim Grover posted yesterday, like showing up is
I
zero.
shared that. I shared
Yeah,
that. I loved it.
so good. Like 0% of the battle. Like cool, you showed up. Like that's basically the equivalent of getting out of bed today. Like you
Yeah.
don't deserve anything for that. You just
You exist.
that's
Good
where it
job.
like step one of the rest is right still ahead of you. So I thought that was great. Anyways, but yeah, I think, I wouldn't be where I am without social media. So I can't bash it 100%. I have to, there's a give and take. And I think most people do not have the ability to know where to draw the line or to know when it's becoming too much or it's consuming them. And I think most people would not be content to be alone without their phone or they don't spend any time, away from it and just be by themselves or be in solitude. And I think a lot of the best thinking, the best breakthroughs come from, when I'm away from my phone and I'm journaling. I don't go on social media until at least noon, probably 95% of the time. I have to have my morning hours. It's my most productive time. It's just when I get the most work done and I don't want to be distracted by anything else. So I like allow myself a certain window of time to be on social media. And that's done wonders for me. And then I turn it off, by 9 p.m. so I can have at least an hour to myself and folk and just wind down and not be distracted because it could eat you alive with the amount of
Yeah.
news going on and the stuff going on in the world. Like I find myself sometimes getting sucked into it and it can affect my mood. It can affect my ability to focus when I've got all these other things going on and just the input constantly from the outside world. So I think most people don't have boundaries, and it's just the phone is an extension of them. And I am guilty of that at times, being running an online business and having a team that I manage. I need to be connected most of the time, and I do feel guilty if I'm not, or if I miss an urgent message from my assistant or from a team member or something like that. But I think leading by example is important. So if I can show people that I create boundaries for myself, then hopefully others will follow that lead and understand the importance of having that distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome advice. And it's so important, I think, these days for everyone to like to give purposeful, conscious thought to what is my approach to how I manage social media in my daily life. Because, and just like you said, I think most people don't. They don't have any boundaries. They haven't even thought about it. They're just constantly looking. And look, I was extremely guilty of this. And when I first realized that I this feels like an AA meeting or something. When I first realized I had a problem with social media, it was when so the very first guest I had on this podcast. Are you familiar with Seth Feroce? By any chance, he has Axe and Sledge supplements. He's a former IFBB pro, extremely successful entrepreneur now, and he has what is it? All American Roughneck Apparel. He's at several companies. Great guy, and he was the first guest I had on my show, and I w- I was messaging him back and forth, you know, leading up to the show, and then it was a Sunday, and I was sending him these messages, just kind of confirming some things because I was going up to where he is in Pennsylvania, and we were going to do it in person at his headquarters. And I was getting no response all day long. And I was like, oh my God, he's ghosting me. I've already paid for my flight. What's going on? I was freaking out. And then I hear from him Monday morning. He's like, sorry, dude, Sundays are 100% off limits, social media, nothing. It's family time. I don't look at it. And that was the first time I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I need to start implementing stuff like that in my life. I wish he had given me a heads up because I freaked out, but that makes so much sense. And since then, it's like you start to see all these different studies and articles and things come out. A buddy of mine shared with me earlier today. I think I reposted it on my story, but Dennis Meralda, he has Building Men podcast and he coaches young men. It was a chart of the average screen time for young people, and it was like 8 hours is like the average if you're in that like 15-year-old range. 8 hours a day. Like you're doing a full-time job of scrolling social media all day long. That is insane.
Yeah, and I'm sure most of that 8 hours is not like, you
No,
know, educational and productive, it's just mindless time wasting.
it's looking at the girls posting the booty stuff. That's what
Yep.
it is, and that's why it's such this detrimental cycle of like we reward the bad activities and then it's like, you know, it's this cycle and it's tough because I'm like, man, if when I was 16 years old, I probably would have been on TikTok all day long, you know, talking to my friends because we went into the AOL Instant Messenger and AIM chat rooms and stuff after school and talked to our friends, and we weren't concerned about how many hours we were spending on it or anything like that. You don't even care about that crap when you're a teenager, right?
Right.
So it really is frightening stuff to me. And I think I saw talking about how you limit your social media up until noon and everything, which I think is amazing. That's because you get that opportunity for deep work for the first part of the day. And I'll probably start trying to do something similar myself. You also, I think I heard you talk about how you limit caffeine consumption early in the day. And I've heard Huberman talk about this and the interaction with adenosine and everything, and why you have better prolonged energy if you can delay that. Can you talk about that a little bit and how like the change you've noticed with that? Because a lot of people probably hear, well, I like to limit my social media so I'm productive early in the day, but I also don't drink caffeine during that time. And they're like, well, how the heck are you productive? Because
Yeah.
caffeine's another crutch that I think we have.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I definitely drink caffeine every day, but I
Me too.
do I love coffee. I would drink decaf, like, I drink decaf at night. I love the taste of coffee, and for me, it's just such a ritual. I make a pour over, I'm super bougie about that, but, um, I just love the ritual of the, different trying different coffee beans from different types different regions of the world, and, like, the whole like, that whole thing, it's just something I enjoy. So, I do drink it every day, but, I learned from the Huberman Lab podcast about the caffeine delay. So 90 minutes to 120 minutes after waking is the ideal time to start consuming. And I've always been adamant about drinking water first. Like the first thing I do in the morning is drink water with electrolytes and whatever to restore electrolyte balance after sleeping. But I used to, before I learned all this, I would just do water and then shortly after I'd make my coffee. I was like water and then I'd go for a walk and then coffee. So usually within like 30 or 45 minutes. And I pushed that to 90 minutes to 120 minutes just from what I learned from him. And it's just basically about setting your circadian rhythms and having more consistent energy throughout the day. So most people get that crash around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and a lot of that stems from the immediate caffeine consumption upon waking. And so I tried it myself, and I was like, oh wow, this is different. And I usually, when I train with my coach, we train at 3 or 4, and so it was like right around that time before I go to training. I was like, why do I just want to take a nap right now?
Yeah.
And so I tried the caffeine delay and paired with the morning sunlight. So the morning sunlight is something I've been doing for quite a while, over a year now. But the sun's rising later, so I go for my walk around 7:45 or 8, and then I don't drink my first cup of coffee until like 8:30, and I usually wake up around 6 or 6:30. So it's made a huge difference, and my energy is much more consistent throughout the day. I used to get when I first started the caffeine delay, I'd get headaches immediately because of the caffeine withdrawal or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
that's the adenosine receptors and all that. But I don't get that. Like I don't get the headache at all. Even if some days I wait until 9:30 or 10 or whatever, and I don't get a headache. So it is really interesting to go through that, and my sleep's
Yeah.
been better than it ever has. I've been sleeping very very consistently, and I also have a very consistent sleep and wake schedule, which helps. But yeah, just all good things have come from the caffeine delay paired with the morning sunlight.
Yeah. I think the general theme is just self-awareness, right? Like it's most people, again, just like they don't think about when they're interacting with social media, they don't think about all of these things that are so important, like getting early morning sunlight, right? And delaying your caffeine intake and all these simple things that can have huge benefits in your life. People just sort of get caught in the cycle of, oh, this is what it's like to just be a 40-year-old guy who works in corporate America and, my back hurts, I'm overweight, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, man, start going for a walk in the morning, drinking more water, all those little things. It will absolutely change your life. And that's why I started talking about this thing I call the six principles, because the feedback I get from a lot of people is that they're just overwhelmed. And I think a lot of people who don't really have backgrounds in fitness, like yourself, and a lot of my other friends who I consider to be high performers, a lot of them are coaches, and they're just, you see them and you're just like, man, I could never be like that. Talking about like the average person, right? And they get overwhelmed with qualitative stuff. And so, paleo versus keto versus carnivore versus counting macros versus this versus that, like, oh, what should I do? And they're focusing on that when they can't even tell me right now what their daily caloric intake is. And it's like, well, hold on a second. Let's just talk about protein, calories, water, sleep, weights, cardio, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
focus on, like, because right now you're so lost. You're like a ship in the middle of the night with no rudder in the middle of a storm, and you're worried about the temperature of the sand on the beach. Like, who cares, right? And so many people are just like, "Should I try keto? Should I?" It's like, dude, no. You should. How? What did
You missed
you?
the point.
How, right? How many calories did you consume yesterday? Oh, I don't know. How much protein do you consume? I don't know. Do you drink enough water? I don't know. It's like, start there. And I think that just having that awareness, like, you're very aware of what you're consuming, whether it's what you're consuming mentally on social media and what you're putting in your body and how that affects your performance. And I think most people just don't even connect those dots, and they just sort of mindlessly amble through life. And then they wonder why they're fat, sick, and low energy and everything.
Yeah, or they try one thing for 2 weeks and then they don't see results, so they think it doesn't work. I mean, there's so much wrong with all of everything that you said. It's so accurate, but
Yeah.
it's such a huge problem, and people are missing the point, and they're letting perfect be the enemy of the good. It's like if you just did these 6 basic things, you'd probably feel at least 50% better in
Yeah.
your daily life. Like having pain is not normal. Being overweight is not healthy. Like all these are just basic things, but people are they're trying to do they're trying to strive for perfection, and the same thing I just talked about this on a recent podcast too. It's like you can do all the cold plunging and you can do all the fancy this that and the other, but if you're not sleeping, like that is number one for recovery. Like forget all the rest of the fancy recovery protocols and the cryotherapy and the normatec compression socks. Like that's all great, but if you haven't nailed your sleep, then none of it matters.
Right.
So let's start with getting better quality sleep, and that starts with morning sunlight and caffeine delays, and how you spend your time and your energy during the day, and you managing your stress and having a routine before bed that doesn't involve technology or dimming and go dimmer on the lights. Like all these things are not hard; they're very simple, but people just they don't have the discipline or the knowledge. I think it's probably a combination of both, and or they're overwhelmed with the amount of conflicting information on all of these
Yeah.
arenas, because there's a lot of that too. And so I understand, like I have sympathy for people because they're very overwhelmed because there's so much information and a lot of it doesn't fit together. So I think people really ultimately just trial and error. That's how I got to where I am. It's a lot of trial and error with nutrition, with recovery, with sleep, with training, just all of it. It's I've spent over a decade just trying different things, training for different goals, doing different nutrition protocols, and I got different results. And it's just paying a little bit of attention to like how your body responds to things, and awareness is it's
Yeah.
key.
Yeah. I often think, because I'm a father, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and a lot of times I just kind of observe how she makes her way through life as a little kid. And I'm like, I need to be more like that, because you think about it, it's like she doesn't consume any caffeine. So all she drinks is water and whole milk. We let her have whole milk with breakfast. But and then, she just eats regular whole foods. She does, it's the like, I think the purest form of how our bodies are supposed to function, right? Like, so she gets a solid like 10 hours of sleep every night. I mean, because when bedtime comes, she can barely hold her eyes open, sleeps through the night, gets up basically with the sun, is ready to go, doesn't need caffeine, nothing. And I mean, she's just like, bu- not really, forgive the expression, but balls to the wall for the entire day. And then
Yeah.
it's like hard sleep again, right? And I'm like, man, if we could just be more childlike and just move your body, drink water, get good sleep. It's like the the instincts we have are telling us the right things, but a lot of times we stray so far away from it with these artificial impositions of like office schedules and fluorescent lights and caffeine and all these things that just mess everything up. It's like, dude, just try to be more like a kid and you'll probably be a lot healthier.
Yeah, well, with the caveat that, not all parents are like you and your child is
Right,
very
right, right,
healthy,
right.
so
Yeah,
there's a lot of parents that don't care or put the amount of effort in that you do, and it's just like throw your kid in with a juice box with artificial colors and flavors and all these packaged foods, and they, whatever, put them behind a screen all day and play video games instead of telling them that they have to get outside and be in nature and get some sunlight. And so, that's another conversation. But
yeah.
yes, that good for you for teaching her that.
It's really sad, and we wonder why we have the mental health issues we have starting at a young age. I mean, I think it's more than 60% of Americans are obese or overweight now,
Yep.
and it doesn't help that popular culture glorifies obesity as beautiful. And of course, I'm evil for saying that, but I don't care because here's the thing: if it stops one person from ending their life early because they get their shit together,
It
beautiful, right? Let's stop saying that you can be healthy at any size because that's antithetical to all of the scientific evidence, period, full stop,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that's why I just I think it's so important to speak out against that kind of stuff. And people are like, why do you care so much? Just let the bikini model that's 400 pounds be on the cover of the magazine and let them say that you can be healthy at any size. I'm like, no, because I have a daughter. And like these things matter so much because kids are sponges and they're taking everything in. And if we're putting our kids in front of screens, feeding them processed foods, just all the things you mentioned, and then we're also saying, "Hey, it's cool to be fat." Like, this is a huge problem.
Yeah,
And
then add in all the social media messaging that they're getting, and it's a
that
recipe for
too.
disaster. Yeah, all these unrealistic, on both sides, you should be this thin, or it's okay to be this fat. Like both of them are problematic for young girls that are just trying to figure life out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just like the suicide rates and all these things, and younger people are sky high. Young girls have body issues, like you said. You see a lot of, and I get a lot of heat for this too, but like, just look at the evidence. It's like you see a lot of young girls that are wanting acceptance, and it's just an awkward stage of life. Like when you're a preteen slash early teenager, I mean, you remember there's like the goth kids and this and that, and everybody's just looking for their tribe and acceptance, and it's like the end of the world if you're not cool to your people, right? And
Mhm.
it has created this rise in now it's cool to be like non-binary or gender non-conforming. And when you couple that with a medical industry that is just perfectly cool with saying, "Hey, if you identify as this, you can get surgery or you can get puberty blockers." Like this is a huge problem, and it's crazy to me that people like myself or even the more prominent figureheads of this, like some of the guys at the Daily Wire, for example, they get demonized for saying, "Hey, let's not cut our children's privates off. Is that cool if we don't do that until maybe they're older and they can actually make decisions?" Right? But it's almost like the Twilight Zone, Rebecca, where it's like, why am I bad for saying this?
Yeah,
It's crazy.
it is crazy. My husband and we talk about this every day, and we were just talking about it last night. I mean, he's active duty military, so he can't really say much. He's until he gets
Sure.
out. He'll be retired in 2 years, but
Awesome.
yeah, he's ready to really speak his mind on some of this stuff. But I can speak my mind and without getting too into the weeds on it. But yeah, I agree with you 100% on everything you said, and it is the Twilight Zone. I can't like I think in 2020 we were like it can't possibly get any crazier than this, and then 2021 happened, and we're like wait, it's crazier, and now we're in 2022, and every year since COVID hit, it's just seemed to become more and more the Twilight Zone, and like how far are we going to let this go, and people who are like, we have to fight against this. Okay, but what are we doing about it?
Yeah.
Like speaking is good. We spread awareness and we can rally people and get behind the cause. But ultimately, like, when are we going to actually take action and change some of these things and put a stop to it? Because it's going to, like, I'm scared. Like, I don't have kids, but I am terrified for the future generations. And what is America going to always be the greatest country? I still think we're the greatest country, and we're miles ahead of most of the other countries in the world. But it doesn't, we made it that way in the people that have fought for us to be where we are now in our past generations. And if we don't continue to preserve that for future generations, like, we may not be the greatest country on earth or the superpower in by the next generation. It's up to
Yeah.
us to maintain that.
Yeah, it's crazy because when you look at, and the reason I brought this up is because we got on the topic of sleep and nutrition and rest, or, sleep is rest, but you know what I'm saying, like water and delaying caffeine and all those things and screen time and all. It's like you, even if you weren't trying, there's a perfect storm of all these variables that just make us easy to manipulate, to control. They make us weaker. They make us exactly what you said, the opposite of all the things that got this country to its position of prominence in the world. And and that includes things like free speech, which are also, I think, on the chopping block in a lot of ways, right? And it is extremely concerning. And it's like meritocracy, just this general concept that if you work really hard and become the best, you reap the rewards of that. Like, that very concept is demonized. And again, back to what I was saying when we first started, that's why I like talking to people like you who have essentially gone out into the world and made something of yourself, competed in the free open marketplace, created a brand and delivered results to people. And so you're benefiting from free market capitalism and meritocracy. And any entrepreneur or business owner does. And it's like there are extremely powerful forces that want to diminish the importance of that in our society, along with making us fat, stupid, slow, um,
Controllable.
controllable. And it's like, if even if you weren't trying, you have successfully created this perfect storm to control and manipulate a population. And of course, when you talk about stuff like this amongst I like to say normies, like people who just don't consider that, most people are just trying to work their job, make a living, put their kids through school, etc., as it should be. Like, you shouldn't have to be all wrapped up in this stuff. But I start talking about that stuff and I'm immediately like, dude, you're crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. It's like, man, I mean, just look at the data, look at the stats, right? So, what do you think are some things we can do? Because you talk about taking action, and I agree 100%. Obviously, as a parent, it starts at home for me, like the way I raise and teach my child. Um, I started going to church just recently. Like, literally, it just wasn't something I did. I wasn't raised in the church. I had a pretty rough childhood and just never happened. And so, but as a parent now, I'm like, I'm getting my child involved in the church, and whether or not she chooses to believe some of the core messages, just the structure and the community and all these things are so important in her life. And I think all of those things are good. And then, of course, there are community organizations that are sort of grassroots that are pushing back against the imposition of some of the stuff in the educational system on a local level. But like, what else? What else do you think we can do? I mean, because we have talk about the military, right? Like, we have strong forces pushing to lower PT requirements because of, now all of a sudden it's bad to say men and women are different and we have different physical capacities. You can't say that. And it's just like, y- we're talking about pronouns and official military trainings and stuff. Like, how the hell do we push back against this?
It's gonna tough. I mean, it's gonna be really tough. I
Yeah,
think it's an uphill battle, but I think it's one worth fight. I think we have to fight it.
we
I
have
think
to. Yeah,
we have to for our society, for our future generations. Like, isn't the goal always to leave the world, the country, the community, whatever, better than you found it, right? And so at this moment, I don't think we're doing that to our next future generation, if we don't change some things. But I think, to your point, I think community involvement is huge. I think it starts in the home. Obviously, God knows what they're teaching our kids in school now. So, being it, I don't have kids again, so I feel like I can't speak from a place of experience when it comes to the schooling thing. But I know a lot of people who are homeschooling their kids for that exact reason. And so if people have the means to do that, and I know not everybody does, but I think that's a great alternative to the public school system. And but if that's not an option, then at least for the parents in when their kids are at home, instilling those values, teaching them to just be good contributing members of society with strong values and the things that got us to where we are in this country today, just reinforcing those things. And then just becoming, self-sufficient. And I don't know if I think you know who Ryan Mickler is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I like
So I
Ryan.
know I have not read his book, Sovereign, or Sovereignty. Um, I think that I understand the concept of it, and I think it's really powerful. So, just starting with your own family unit, becoming self-sufficient, having all the things in place in preparation for anything that might come our way. Um, so just being yeah, starting in the home and just being able to defend yourself, to feed yourselves, and if we're not there, I know most people are not there, but taking steps to get there, I think is powerful, and it's an important lesson and an important example to lead for the kids.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of things, it's like a pendulum, and my hope is that we saw the farthest the pendulum would swing with some of this stuff, and
Hope
there
so.
is starting to be this pushback, this resistance of, I mean, you see record numbers of people enrolling in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and all these things, and homesteading has become extremely popular, and people are learning how to be self-sufficient. Um, I agree with all of that. I think one of the biggest issues that we face, if we try to extrapolate a lot of these things out, it's pushing collectivism, right? It's shirking responsibility as an individual because daddy government is going to handle it. And now you're left with no skills. You're not capable. You've outsourced all of your everything to exterior forces, which is exactly what they want you to do because now they can control you. And reclaiming that power, like you said, learning how to be self-sufficient, how to be sovereign. That's why I put out a shirt that says sovereign on the front of it. And it's extremely important. And that's what, I mean, everything from like what you do, making sure you're strong physically, you're strong mentally, again, it comes back to like self-awareness. Like what, as I go through life, what am I actually doing, right? Am I responding? Am I only responding to stimuli, or am I actually creating, producing, being the captain of where this ship goes, right?
Yeah.
I think that's extremely important, and people need to do that. And unfortunately, being in this space and getting to know a lot of these people who put out this messaging, you'll see a lot of like people saying the right things, like everything we've said, but then you kind of get a peek behind the curtain and they're not living their lives that way. And I'm like, man, yeah, I love that you're putting this message out. I love that you're telling people all of these things, but if you really want to make a change, you have to start in your own life. Like you have to get your financial house in order. You have to take care of your body. You have to learn how to be self-sufficient, all these things. And anyway, that was just a bit of a rant, but like I think things are trending in the right direction, and the pendulum is starting to swing back, but it's just going to take a lot of pushing, a lot of fighting. I think the decentralization of information in the media is huge, right? The fact that we can do this and put it out to thousands of people is huge. And the institutions have lost their stranglehold on the dissemination of information, right? It's no longer just CNN and Fox and MSNBC, et cetera. It's like some scrub sitting in his daughter's playroom can talk to awesome people like you and put it out there. So I didn't want this to be bleak and hopeless and everything, because I do think a a lot of us are doing the right things. Um, another thing I wanted to bring up, because I noticed that I know you were in San Diego before and you're affiliated with Draco Fuel. Is that um, how did you get involved with them? Is Jocko somebody that you've actually met and interacted with, being from the area? What was that like? Because I'll be completely transparent. He's like one of my uh I guess you would call it role models, right? Virtual mentors, read all his books,
Yep.
consume all his material. I love his messaging, and I think he's needed these days in a lot of ways. What's your what's that all about?
Yeah,
You know,
I
the best
agree.
way to ask that.
No, yeah, it's been fun, getting to know the Draco Fuel company and brand and Jocko himself. I have met him several times, spent quite a bit of time with him, on different occasions. But so it started in 2020 when I was living in San Diego. It was actually just about a month before COVID hit, and they were launching Jocko Fuel nationwide in Vitamin Shop. And so he had an in-person event at the Vitamin Shop in Balboa, and I was finished work. I think they were 9 to 5 there. I finished work at 4 that day. I just zipped down there and it was like, oh, I'll catch the tail end. Hopefully I can meet him. And I met him and Echo Charles, Dakota Meyer was there. And
Nice.
and then the guys from Jocko Fuel had flown in from Maine, and so I got to know them, spent like an hour or so with them, and then I just kept in touch on social media. And at the time, I had like 3,000 followers, and so I remember reaching out and being like, "Do you guys do brand ambassadorships? Is that a thing?" Like I was just getting, I wasn't even an entrepreneur or anything. I was still working for Equinox at the time, but I just, for some reason, like meeting them, people always say, don't meet your heroes or whatever. But like, and I had read his books up to that point, Extreme Ownership and the Dichotomy
Yeah.
of Leadership. And I just meeting him and seeing him in person, it was just like this larger than life experience. But it was like a good thing. Like I met him and then only good things happened after that. It was like a catalyst from just this extreme amount of inspiration, motivation, and I know motivation's BS, but
Mhm.
it was like just I was so inspired by just being around people like that, and I was like, these are the people I need to surround myself with. And it was kind of I didn't realize at the time because COVID hadn't hit yet, but it was like a very close to that pivotal moment for me where I had that crossroads and I had to decide what I was going to do. And so just reading his stuff and his teachings, it was just like very much at the forefront for me. And so I kept in touch with them, and afterwards, I think about 2 months later or something, they asked me if I wanted to be one of their brand ambassadors, and I was like, "Really? Sure, absolutely." So I did. And I was just starting to post about the products, and I used them, and I really enjoyed them. And then over time, I took a trip out to Maine, which is where Draco Fuel is headquartered, and I took a tour of their factory and just saw what they were doing. Like, because or they've since become two separate companies, Origin and Draco Fuel, but at the time they
Yeah.
were basically one. And so Origin makes all the apparel, the boots, the jeans, it's all American made. And I was just like this, and during COVID, no less, like this was what this is a brand I wanted to be a part of. Like their values, just putting American hands to work, and all of their entire supply chain is in the United States. Their material, every single thing in all of their products was grown, homegrown. And so, and during when everything was shut down and everything was outsourced to China, like this was something I knew I wanted to be a part of. And so just growing with the company and becoming connected with their people, and then eventually, spending more time with Jocko and doing some different work with like media work and stuff with them, it's just opened my eyes to how wonderful they really all are. And then Jocko's teachings, obviously, like I've continued to implement them in my life, and extreme ownership and discipline is like at the forefront of everything that I do and what I preach. So he's been a huge influence for me, and a catalyst to a lot of the things that I've been able to achieve, and my mindset, my personal growth, my professional growth. And so I'm super grateful for to be connected to that community.
Yeah. You mentioned something at the beginning of that I think is really an interesting concept, and I think it can go both ways. So meeting your heroes, right? There are certain people that I've met, absolutely. I meet them and it's like, "Oh man, you ain't shit." But then there are people you meet and it's like, "Wow, dude, you're everything you portray and actually more." So an example of a person like that who's become a friend and someone really impactful in my life is Andy Frisella, who has First Form. I got involved with his company back in 2017, I want to say, something like that, maybe. But I had listened to his podcast from the very first episode while I was building my company. So I used to own a chain of restaurants. I ended up selling that in 2018. But literally all along the way, I was listening to the MFCEO project as I built my company, just like taking information. And I've told him this. I was like, dude, thanks for everything you did helping me build my company. You didn't even know it. But and then finally when I got involved with First Form officially and in various capacities, met Andy, went out there and everything. I'm like, oh wow, you do everything you talk about. You're actually living the way you tell people to live. And I think that's extremely powerful when you can meet someone like that and you find out, oh, they're actually not full of it. They are really living this way. I think it can hammer that in even more. So like you meeting Jocko and seeing, oh yeah, he actually does these things. He actually leads this way. This is actually who he is. It instills in you that it's really possible. And that's something that I try to keep in mind when I meet people now, because it's weird, and you may have experienced this too. Once you get a little bit of a following on social media, just someone will recognize you. I live in the kind of like a small town, so and there it's this weird dynamic where they know all these things about you because you're putting a lot of stuff out on social media and you don't know who they are. And at first you can be like a little standoffish, right? But it I started to realize like, man, I can really impact them if I give them that feeling of not only does Dave say these things, but he lives these things. And that gives me no excuse not to go live these things too. You know what I
Yep,
mean? Does that make sense with
absolutely.
that? And
Yep.
and so, like, there are a key few people that I have met that I got to first know on social media, right? And then it's weird when you meet them in real life and they become friends and stuff, and you're like, "Wow, dude, you not only do you do everything you say you do, you're actually more extreme, and you should put more content out showing all this other stuff you do because wow." So there are people like that out there, and I just think that's important to highlight because like you, for example, the reason I like your content is that not only do you know what you're talking about, but you clearly live what you're talking about because of the shape you're in. And you're like, I've mentioned your mechanics a few times. Like, as someone who has done Olympic lifts, albeit in CrossFit, and I was garbage, I realize how complex the snatch is, for example, and everything that goes into it. And so it's just really cool seeing Olympic lifters who exemplify good form because I never had it. But yeah, I just think that that's important to mention. There are people out there who are putting stuff online and they're quote influencers and they are really living what they say. I
Yeah.
just think that that's incredibly important to highlight because you can get this sort of nihilistic perspective where you're like, oh, all these people who are online, they're just saying this stuff, but they're not really doing it. People like Jocko really do it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I can tell you for sure because my last trip to San Diego, I actually ended up staying at his house for a couple days. I know his daughter works. She manages all the athletes and ambassadors for Draco Fuel, and I've become good friends with her. And so, long story short, I ended up staying at their house for a couple nights when I was in town. And sure enough, he was, the room that I was staying in was right above the gym where he trains. And at 5:30 in the morning, I woke up to barbell slamming on the ground, and like there was a cold plunge that he he talks about doing cold plunges, that he went for a ruck, he went to jujitsu, worked for several like all the things that he does. And I've seen him interviewed before. He's like, my life, people think I'm really interesting, I'm very boring, my life is the same every day. I do podcasts, I write, I train jujitsu, I work out, I ruck. Like that's literally the 4 days that I was there was like that every single day. He truly practices what he preaches. He's also a great family man, and like, to see him interact with his family was really cool too. But and he's a great father, and but he's everything he's that you see, like that's how he is, and who he is at his core, and the things that he does and believes. It's all there. So that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
refreshing to see.
There's something to say for living a quote boring life that where
Oh,
you
that's
have a
me.
routine. Yeah, it's man,
I love
it's
it.
everything. It's hard to forge yourself into anything without consistency. And consistency can be boring. And so you've got to accept that. I think, just for anybody listening who's like, man, I want to have a six pack or whatever goal you've set for yourself or target. I don't like saying goals. Um, it's gonna take that boring shit, right?
Yeah,
Like you didn't get good at the snatch or clean and jerk by just doing it here and there, right? Like you have a program that you follow. You do it every day, or of course, I'm sure you have rest days, but like methodically over and over and over and over again. And that's what it takes. And in business too. And this takes it full circle back to when we talked about how entrepreneurship is glamorized, but most of the time it's anything but glamorous. And I know we blew through this hour. I want to be respectful of your time and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. But just to wrap it up, kind of a two-part question. What has been the biggest challenge you faced the last couple years with going out on your own and starting the coaching business, unexpected or otherwise? And you can group these together if you want. What's one piece of advice you would give to young people today with everything they face coming into 2023 on the horizon, if you could impart any of your wisdom on them?
oof, gosh, so many challenge. So the biggest challenge I guess they kind of go, it's a couple things, but kind of all tied together. So learning how to delegate has been a huge challenge.
Mm,
I'm a very type A controlling person, and I've always done individual sports. I did gymnastics for 12 years. So while I was on a part, a team of individual competitors, it's an individual sport, and your performance is only dependent on you.
yeah.
Um, you're not relying on teammates for that. So I grew up with that and like very driven in school. And so controlling everything in my world and going from, working as a manager and then becoming a solopreneur at first, basically, where it was just myself and my clients and I could manage that no problem. But then when came time to grow into entrepreneurship and actually become like an operational business, where it's more than just me learning how to delegate and let go of some control. And that's an art, I think, in itself. Just learning how finding the right people that you can trust to offload tasks to, and still have the business run successfully. Letting go of some of that control is really hard for me. So, and it still is. It's a work in progress for sure. And then kind of working through some of the imposter syndrome. I think a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from that, and just like no, like doubting whether I have what it takes. Can I be successful? And what the hell am I doing? Waking up some days feeling super fired up, and other days like, what have I gotten myself into? Kind of two things together have been my biggest challenges. I guess I'm my own worst enemy in some senses. So, and then piece of advice, gosh, so many, but
Yeah, pretty much this whole episode, everything we said, that's your advice, guys.
yeah, I think leaning into hard work and challenges, I think, is probably one of the best things, because as we talked about earlier, like people are so averse to hard work. They want to get rewarded for showing up,
Mhm.
and whatever place that you finish, it's all good. Like I don't agree with that. And I think people that, yeah, you do need to show up. That's step one of many. And so um embracing challenges, embracing struggles, because they aren't going to last forever. If you've probably seen that, I think it's a meme or whatever. There's a graph of like a day in the life of an entrepreneur, and there's like ups and downs. Like forget the long term, like the 1 year, like that's in 1 day. Like you get
Yeah.
all of that in 1 day. And so just knowing that if you're going through a hard time, it's gonna pass, and it's not always going to be doom and gloom, and there are brighter days on the other side. But you have to work really freaking hard to get, to achieve any goal of any size. But just sticking through it, trusting the process, reaching out to people who have achieved what you want to achieve, and just building a network. I think the network is really powerful too. And that's something I've been super grateful to build over the last couple of years, is just surrounding myself with people that are way more successful, way smarter and stronger, whatever, in whatever area I want to improve, just having people that have been there, done that, to look up to, not to take advantage of, but to just be there as, source of information
Absolutely.
and support and inspiration. So I
Well,
think
and people like that generally get excited when they see younger people at an earlier stage that reminds them of themselves, and they want to help, especially if you find a way to create value for them as well. So,
definitely.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for your time, Rebecca. I do want to say that, because it's easy for us to lose sight of this, but just know that what you're doing is creating a positive impact in the world. And as entrepreneurs and as influencers, we we can really take it in any direction, and the direction you're taking it, I think, is one that is going to be a very positive impact on the lives of a lot of people and really help to solve a lot of these problems we talked about today. So for that, I'm very grateful that people like you exist and for what you're doing, and I thank you for that. Where can everybody find you if they want to hit you up for coaching or just follow along on your journey or any of that stuff?
Definitely. So Instagram would be the social media platform that I use most often. So at Rebecca.Rouse is my personal, and then at Semper Stronger is the business page, and then our website is semperstronger.com.
Boom. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I appreciate you. Like I said, this hour flew by. We definitely should do it again in the future. And everybody listening, until next time, keep your minds free.